thought about making a film one day? Good. How many people here have actually taken creative steps to write a script from that? Okay, good. So then the next step, eventually, when you guys are happy with the creative, which can take a long time. There's no time frame for this. I've done projects that we wrote the night before and we were filming it the next day. Everybody's done those 24-hour challenges. Those are really fun because, they'll put you through the ringer. But this is more about what happens once the creative is done, right? Like once that is in place, it is called the film business, isn't it? Not just the film arts or the film whatever. We go and pay money to see these films. It's a monetary transaction, and for that, it needs to be taken seriously in that regard. And I think that I am grateful to be here too, because I took that for granted to a certain extent, and I keep taking it for granted. You forget how intricate it can be, but you also forget how capable you are. So this is to tell you that even though this may be a little bit daunting and you guys might be like, oh my God, I don't know that I'm ready for that, I can tell you that this is all stuff that you could figure out, like even if nobody was to teach you anything, which that's why I'm here for. So you guys are not starting from scratch, but you could figure this out. I've read every single thing there was to read. You ask a lot of questions. You don't care if people laugh or don't laugh. At least you got your answer. And you keep asking the question because somebody else might have a different interpretation. So that is what producing is all about. And the way I like to start with this, I have a child, 8-year-old, and we like to tell stories to each other. And I was thinking about, this talk, and I said, really, how did it start for me? And I think it went something like this. One day while at recess, young Adrian tells Coco a story he made up last night in his head. She intensely listened to Adrian's words, and as she is able to see into his universe, she cries, she laughs, and she feels inspired by his story. As she goes to sleep that night, she thinks about his story, how much she wants to see this story made for the enjoyment, not just of herself, but she wants to share this happiness, this whatever she felt while he was telling the story. She wants other people to feel the same way he made her feel. So as she drifts to sleep, she thinks of ways of where she can take this story from his head and into our known universe. It's very intense, you guys. It's like being a midwife, really. It's somebody else has this idea, this project. It could be yourself. I'm saying somebody else because it's easy for me to talk, but the duality can be internal. You could be your own director, producer. I've seen that. Hard, but I've seen it. So what I'm talking about is more, even if it's two people or yourself, at some point you have to come to the realization that, okay, it looks great here. How do I bring it out? And that's where we come in, right? If you identified with either of those two characters or a little bit of both, then you're in the right place, right? Obviously, I'm definitely a Coco. I love Adrian's. I think they're great. But what I like to do is I see talent and be able to help that come out. So the film or project, because it could be not a film, is one made from the resulting alchemy between the creative and the business relationship being in balance and harmony when one is supportive of the other and vice versa. So it's kind of a reiteration of the same thing that I was explaining, right? So there's a lot, is an easy way to understand it would be a marriage, right? Where you say, well, we want to go on vacation and we want to do these things, and you dream big and you think of the sunset and all the things you want to do, right? That's your script. And then somebody else has to think like, oh, we need like the flights and we need to, book the tickets and oh, where's more expensive, this one, that one, which one fits with our schedule. And so they're both very important parts of the same thing that have to work together all the time and be in communication and be respectful of each other. That relationship is very important. It's my job to fulfill what's in the script, but it's also the script jobs to not give me something that is beyond the means of what we're doing. What is a producer? and like we said, it's a midwife, right? It's the person that has that interest, ability, talent, desire to bring a project that is non-tangible into the tangible world, where then it will become eventually part of a system of an economy, the film business. In what degree is up to the project, but the producer is basically that person. Now, there is, do all producers do the same thing? Did I skip one? No. Do all producers do the same thing? Nope. Nope. There are many, many, many types of producers, and you guys have seen it because when we sit in the credits, we're like, where did all these people come? There's a lot of producers. They all do different things, and as you get higher in the ranks, it gets more specialized. I would say that today we're going to concentrate on the independent producer, which is my favorite. But for simplicity and for those who've gone to film school and done this, it might be a little bit redundant, but it's worth repeating. The type of producers, which we're going to see later. How many producers does my project need? Well, that really depends on what you're doing, right? Like, it could be no producer to as many as you need. Some producers come in and they only have a relationship that you need, but they sign on as producer. So really, a producer is a broad term that we use for anybody that's able to help the making of the film that is not on the technical side. So going on to what are the different types of producers? Well, usually the people who go on top is the people who finance us. So executive producers usually are the type of producers that will have involvement with financing of the film, whether it be actual monetary, or some sort of service support, anybody that is contributing in that fashion to the film, it's usually referred to as an executive producer. Then there's just the people who are called producers that are usually involved on all stages of production, responsible of overseeing all producers and being decision makers. So they're kind of like the in-between between the executive producers and what we're going to see later, which is the line producer and the UPM, right? They're kind of like the executives. They fulfill their part. They give us the money, and then they come for the screening. That's, in the indie world, that's usually the route. And then there's the producers who stay with the project and make sure that the executive producers are informed, that we are, you know what I mean? So kind of like the in-between. Then there's the creative producers, right? Those are people that they have certain insight through the creative process, and they help guide the director or anybody else in the crew go into a creative way because their knowledge, it is, they've done this before, they know what works. So a creative producer usually would jump on board to help with story, script, acting, that kind of stuff. Then we have line producers. The line producers creates and manages the budget. Usually it's only involved once the script is locked. The line producer will come in, break down the script, make a budget for it, and then they're the people tasked to find the teams of people to bring in. Those are so when you're filming, I would say the most active producer that you would interact with will be your line producer. Line producers will have friends or support. The first one being the UPM or unit production manager. They work below the line producer and takes care of very specific tasks on the day-to-day basis, I would say. So the line producer oversees the project. The UPM sees more like the day-to-day, like are we having lunch within the contract hours? Is anybody having turnaround issues and that kind of stuff? So that's kind of like what the UPM does. And then the line producer is more like, how many mandates do we have? Are we still on budget? You know, so those are broken down, the duties of a producer. But like I said, in the independent world, you usually will do them all. So it's good to know them separately and know that, you know, you can consolidate. We're going to make a little stop here. And does anybody have any questions? Can I say that? Can I take questions?
Yeah.
Anybody? Yeah.
How much say does an executive producer have over your, I mean, they're putting out the money, so how much say do they have?
It depends on the operational contract between, you know, those are things that are, I like to say that the business sometimes is run by lawyers and accountants. And what I mean by that is that really all those kind of things need to be negotiated up front. Some, you know, there's some executive producers that all they want is the credit. There's some executive producers who wanted to do this all their life, all of a sudden they have money. You know, so it really depends, and it's up to you to set those standards for your relationship going into it. I think one of the best pieces of advice that I got from a producer was, I don't care if it's your brother, get it in writing, right? Because down the line, you know, you said, she said. So it's always, you know, a good producer will tell you that they always have it in writing going in what the parameters of any relationship would be. Yeah.
So, I know you said you could, like, a producer might do all of these things. Do you think one person could do the live production unit production? Like the UPM and the line producer, could you see one person doing?
Yeah, definitely, and that's what I'm saying. Like an independent film, you know, it's me doing all of that. It's you doing all of that. It's, you know, it's definitely better when you separate, right? Than when you, but it is one person. And I was lucky enough to start my career in the macro kind of market where, you know, we have 10 people to do one department, right? And then I drifted from that into independent when it's like, oh, it's just me. I have to cover all of that. So I was lucky because I was able to see everybody do their jobs separately. And so then I knew how to integrate it into myself and be able to do that. Of course, I'm more efficient and better at it the more people you add. But that's the skill you develop as you go, right? And I think the only way is like being able to know the things that need to be foreseen, which we're going to see later, to be able to cover for that. Questions? There's so much here. Okay. Considerations before you start filming. So I know a lot of people who get super excited and then they go out and they run out of money really fast. That's no good. So, you know, once you're happy with your script, like we said, when you lock it in, make sure you look at it again. And whether it's you or somebody that you know that sounds a lot like that Coco person, you know, make sure that they see the budget and they read your script and they're like, oh, we're in Mars? How are we going to shoot Mars? Like, do we have to go here? Like, you know, to start seeing the script for its little pieces, not for its content, but for its little individual components. So, you know, that's fun because it's looking at the script in a different way. And all of a sudden, for the producer, it becomes this puzzle almost that you're trying to fit together. You're saying, okay, what elements need to come together for this film? Do we need stages? Do we need cameras? Like, what are the elements that we need to bring together? So that's what I mean when I said, look at your script from a business standpoint. Make sure you have an accurate budget, right? And go through your budget many times and think about the things that are needed for your film, right? Like, okay, so we need, of course, all the elements that are in front of camera. Those are kind of easy because they're written down. But then you have to use your imagination and provide for those elements. Okay, all the elements are there. Well, you need your camera person, right, to be able to be behind the camera and operate it. How are they going to get there? What is it going to take for us to get there? Like, do we have to pay them, or do we have a relationship? Or, you start finding out all the things that you're going to need to do that. And that's how you would put your budget together. Then you have to consider, well, does my script call for something that's already licensed? That's going to be expensive, right? And so you have to make note of that. Copyrights, right? Like, you have to think about, well, I can't make the same movie somebody else make because I could be sued for that, right? So, like, you really have to look at those kind of things. Like, is this something that it belongs to us? Do we have the copyrights? Do we have the right to be doing this? Like, am I infringing? Like, all those considerations. Then you have to, what we were talking about, agreements, right? You have to think about, okay, I'm going to invite these people and we're going to do this movie, but how do we make sure that this film stays in my creative control or in the direction that I've said to, so you have to put that in writing with every person that you engage. And so those are things that you have to think about before you even start filming, because you have to hand them that before you start filming, right? Because if they don't agree, then you probably don't want them there. So you have to make sure that you guys are clear about that. You also have to, like we were saying, it's a business. So you have to consider that you're going to be transferring money, transactioning money, even if it's just for renting things and buying food and all this stuff. It's a transaction of money, and that money is coming from somewhere, right? And it's going to be reported on a financial report, or is going to be accessed or reviewed by your executive producers or your distributor, whoever it is. But you definitely need to have a paper trail of the business end of your film. We talked about payroll. You have to consider that, right? How you're going to handle that, and by then you're becoming an employer. That's a big deal. So all of a sudden you're subject to, state laws and federal laws and all those kinds of things. So these are real things that we need to concern ourselves about as producers. And this is when I go running for the hills. This is when it really gets scary, right? When you have those kinds of responsibility, and you're like, I'm just trying to make a movie. Yet, without those elements, it's not able to survive. It's not sustainable, right? You can get away with one project or two, but then after a while, it needs to function as a business. Your obligations, what we were saying, what are your deliverables? What your financiers, what are they asking? Is it a financial report? Is it actual money? Like, do they expect money in return? Then you have to do your, profit and loss, and you have to involve professionals to help you, because you're filing taxes for a company. You're, issuing potential 1099s to the people that you're employing, unless you're going payroll route. So I would say that even though the producer is responsible for thinking of these things, the producer is not responsible for actually executing every single one of these things. You're only responsible to think about it and put system in place so that it takes care. So you can, and we'll review it also later, but there's a lot of things that you can do to set yourself up for success, right? Like, involve lawyers, involve accountants, involve yourself, like, connect yourself to the people that may know better than you, because even though you know there's a need, you may not know how to file it, right? So I think that that's important to note, and I think that takes a lot of that pressure away from me, is to say that my only job is to make sure I have it in the budget and that I hire the best person that I know, because with those two things, then you can move forward, right? And a lot of times this works out where, you have an aunt that is just an accountant. And so, you reach out. You met a person here in Olelo that's really, you know what I mean? Like, you just build your community. And with that, it helps bring those elements to you. And then the task is not so daunting, I would say. other considerations, you definitely have to make sure that you know who's going to own this film. Is it an organization? Is it an individual? Do you have to create your LLC? Or you keep, and that's going to be dictated a lot by your financing and distribution, if you have any. If this is all you and you're paying for it, then things get a lot simpler. I think we covered that. But, you're subject to federal and state laws regarding businesses. So, if you have that inkling to be a producer, this is where you take to, the internet, the library, your friends, you Google, just to learn about business, right? And a lot of producers come from the business side of the world. Like, they went for business and then they found this business interesting, and that's how it goes. But not all the time. I was at a film program and then learned the business later. So, there's again, redundant, but yeah, IRS. Make sure people are in place to help you file and report. Consider accounting systems. Now it's so easy. Like, you can have your whole budget and accounting and everything in Excel. I mean, I think everybody here probably has Excel or has access to Excel. No fancy programs, it could be straightforward, but it is something that you're going to use to keep yourself straight, right? Your budget and that kind of stuff. Of course, there's fancy programs to do that, but it's like the big movies, right? You can do it 10 people, but then you're forced to do it in one. So, like I said, there's the accounting system. I'm blanking on the name, but super popular. They sell it at Costco. QuickBooks, right? It works great. I mean, for small projects, I would say under $1 million, QuickBooks, even if it's $4,000, it makes your reporting so much easier. It makes, your accountant want to help you because they know the program, so they might not know what you're really talking about, but they can get the information from the system. So it really helps. There's a lot of things and systems that we can engage to get ourselves in a place that we need. And also, when you're going with the script, consider that the film is an industry and is also subject to its own regulations, right? So when we engage in programs and things of this nature, it is regulated by a series of unions, right? There's a lot of unions in the film industry. There's, of course, state, federal, country, city laws that you have to abide by. You have to get permits for your locations where you're going to be filming and all this stuff. So you have to be, again, aware of those things, right? Understand the industry is governed by its own, and if anybody's staying for the talks later, we'll have Mauricia, who's the SAG rep here, and that's somebody that you definitely eventually down the line you're going to be like, oh, that's something I have to deal with too, and so to be aware, there's unions here in Hawaii, the skilled labor comes from one union, IATSE 665. Most other states have them separated by departments. They're all different. And once you reach a certain budget level, you are subject to all these laws, right? So, it's good to start informing yourself. If you see a SAG thing, you're like, oh, I don't know what that is. But, it's good to familiarize yourself, because those are things that maybe not now, but hopefully in a few years, you are going to concern yourselves about. And again, reach out to professionals, accountants, lawyers, insurance brokers. Like you wouldn't even think that, but to be able to film anywhere, anybody's going to ask you for an insurance certificate, and you're like, a what? Right? And so you're setting up a business, you're supposed to buy an insurance policy that is going to cover your company or you while you're filming in all these places, and that's how you gain access and entrance. So those are all things that you may never even thought about, that you never even knew existed. And that's why I think producing is daunting to people, because it really brings to light all those things that we've been concerning ourselves with being creative, with getting all these things, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay. It's like adulting a little bit. So but it's a wonderful opportunity to build your community. I mean, my best friend is my insurance broker. It's one of those things, like you build your community, you start looking. A lot of times, especially when you're starting, people don't know what you're talking about. They have to figure it out with you. And then, that's what happened with me and my friend Alana, is that she was an insurance agent and I was about to do a movie. And I said, hey, I need insurance. Can I buy it from you? And she says, I have no idea how you buy that. Like, I do houses and pets. And I was like, well, can you figure it out? And she said, well, can you give me a week? Okay. And she came back to me and she had a policy and it looked like all the other policies and it was great. It helped. And then my friend started getting calls from other producers in town trying to get, and it was so cool to be able to build both of ourselves. I got my insurance and now all of a sudden she has a little niche. It's awesome. It's great. But you have to be willing to say, I don't know. Let me figure it out. And that's what producing is a lot about, is you foresee a need, you may not know how to do it, but you're going to figure it out. And as long as you have that little ticker in your heart that just wants to keep going, you're going to be fine, because the answers are there. They're always there. Wow, that was the end of my life. Yay. Questions?
Yeah, the marketing and distribution.
Marketing and distribution, thank you. Marketing and distribution, again, one of those things that you need to think about. Once before you start filming it, make sure you know how this is going to end. Don't start the project if you don't have a home for it. Right? It's even if it's your own home and you're gonna make like a barbecue and show it to your friends, like give yourself that, have that plan. Commit to that, because filming, like any other art, is never done. It's just stopped. And I think that one of the biggest things that a producer does is keep like the budget, the time frame, pulsating at all times for the project. It's easy for the creative process to get stalled, to get delayed. All this is the job of the producer to say, I hear all of that, but we've made this commitment and we need to keep moving forward, and we need, so, it's like that friend that always like is telling you, yeah, okay, but you got to keep going. You can't stop. Yeah, there was complications and we didn't have this, we didn't have it, but we solved it and we're going to go back. So marketing and distribution, in the independent level, we're very fortunate to have organizations on the islands like Pacific Islanders in Communication that really thought of those things, and when you come to them, they will have that already in place with you. How wonderful is that? They take a whole thing that may be above your skill set, but you come to them, they already did it for you. And when you come to them, they'll guide you to the process. And when you're done, you'll be like, oh, wow, that wasn't as daunting. That was great. That's part of community. That's why the community building is important, right? And I think that, we're, like I said, fortunate that these things are in place for us already. Yeah, more questions. Does that satisfy?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yes.
Can you walk us through the journey of you producing Secondhand Hearts from like as far early as you can to like how you got it on Showtime and where it is today?
Okay. Yeah. So that was fun. That was actually, I would say, the first time. So I came to the film business really like not knowing what I wanted. Like, I know when I was a kid, and I was telling the story earlier, all I knew is that I wanted to have my own TV channel. That's how, like, my kid brain said, that's what I want to do. I didn't know what it meant at the time, but it definitely lined me up with media. I went to photography, and that was fun. But then one of my requirements was a video class. And I just loved it. I fell in love with the whole process. It was so creative, so community-based. I thrive on people's energy, and that was, to me, like, I have an idea, but all these people can give input. Like, how fun is that? And so that's how I fell in love with filmmaking. After that, started making films, and, started like everybody does, internship for whatever. Like, I was literally driving my car from Tijuana, which is the border with San Diego, all the way to LA to work for free and come back. So I started doing that. And then you get a job and then another job, and you're a PA, and all of a sudden you're like the travel coordinator, and all of a sudden, like, you start moving up. And then eventually I was really good at like coordinating and doing all the logistics, and that's kind of what I was doing. I was, making money doing that. And all of a sudden one day I remembered, I said, hey, I did not get in filmmaking to like be helping. Yes, to help other people, but not other people that I don't know. That they're, at some point it became a little bit just like a job. And when I feel like I'm doing a job, then it's no fun anymore. So then I started really looking and asking people, hey, like, have you ever thought about making a movie, and like all this stuff? Because I'm building my creative side, but I'm always like to be involved in it. So I was always looking for scripts and talented people. And I'm fortunate enough that, my job, I get to meet a lot of people. So I met a person just like that, and I knew he had a script, and he was showing it around to people in my office, and I was like, I wonder if I'm ever going to get a copy. I didn't say anything. Eventually, I was the boss, so I'm sure it was like intimidating for him, and he said, I have this script, I want to do it, and I want to see if you do it with me. And I said, finally, somebody asked me to do the one thing I really wanted to do. And so at that point, I made a decision that was going to become the thing that I did next, and I stopped working as a coordinator and started doing that. And yeah, it's been a journey. Like, we filmed. It's funny because we didn't have money. My first film, I really had no idea how to raise money and all these things that you don't think about, distribution. So it was a learning film for us. We were fortunate enough that our cast was great, even though there were no name actors. It took us very far, for what we were, a very modest, tiny film that we made in a crazy budget, and was able to. So we did good at the film festival circuit, not like the film festival circuit, like we didn't go to the, but it was. Again, it was a learning opportunity, and then eventually, we hooked up with a sales agent, and they started selling it, and that's how we got to Showtime. Is that they go to all the companies and just show our product and see if they want to buy it, and that's how we got there.
So can I ask questions regarding this?
Of course.
So like, are you able to share how much the budget was and how you raised it?
Not yet, but it was definitely slightly more than we hoped, and very much less than I've ever spent making a film, just because we didn't have it. We got creative with the process. We knew we needed a lot of beautiful images on screen to keep people. But we also didn't have a lot of money. So the script sort of fit that description perfectly, because it all took place in like a nondescript Middle America kind of place, and then Japan. And I was like, okay, good. We can go to Japan, get our production value there, sprinkle it throughout the movie, and then just go to Salt Lake City, Utah, and film the rest. Costs there to do business and stuff is a lot cheaper than other states, so that's why we chose that. But again, it was like the right script because it called for that. Had it been a script that called for Martians and underwater, that wouldn't have worked out. Yes.
So that job was, you became the producer for that man who had a script.
Yes, for the first time. Yeah.
How do you budget how much you will agree on if you don't know how much the film will make?
You mean how does one go about doing a budget?
Or
Kind of.
what do you, in terms of the monetary payment for you as the producer, how much will you say this will be, how much you will pay me?
Oh, I see. There's different ways to go around to answering that question, and I think that it would be different to every person that you ask. I would say that when you do a budget, right, like you would allocate yourself sort of the same amount of money this is what I do, sort of the same amount of money that you do working elsewhere doing something else, so that it doesn't cost you any money, right, additional to do that. And only you would be the judge, I would think, of how many roles you're taking on and what your involvement and, how much your budget is and how much of that percentage you're willing to put. It's a tough question. It really is. And I would say that the best way I can answer that is just it has to be in line with your budget. So it would really depend on that. I don't think there's a certain percentage. It just depends on the role and your involvement and, how you're going to handle it.
So whether the movie makes or not, you're paid.
Sometimes, right? Sometimes there's projects where, you're just doing it for the love and you don't put anything for yourself. And sometimes there are projects that you're like, okay, yeah, I can see we're getting paid or whatever, so then you build something in there for you. I mean, hopefully the goal is that we all get paid while doing this, right? So, but when it is your own project, it's definitely a little bit hard. I find it easier to make a budget for somebody else. Yes?
So in line with that question, so when you're creating your independent film, let's say your first, how many, as the executive, as the producer of that, how many roles do you think you'd have to take on? Because like you said, there's so many different producers involved.
Right.
It would have to be a lot, right?
Right. So I think that for let's say a short film, because that's easy for us to imagine, right? Like a short independent film, I would say it would take you anywhere between 3 and 8 days, I would say, to come up with those minutes, right? To filming. So, you figured, well, I need to film these many days and I have this many resources and this many people. And so basically a lot of what a producer does, and my husband was giving me a funny example, a lot of my job is filling the gap of the things that I was, you know what I mean? It's like, all of a sudden we need toilet paper in the bathroom. Is the producer's job to go get it because, you didn't anticipate that, you didn't provide that. So, to answer your question, I would say that, like we said before, think about how many people you can engage to help you do the things that need to get done, and whatever doesn't get there, then you're fulfilling yourself. Like if you're not able to find, an accountant, then it kind of falls on you to be able to perform that job. Yeah. Yes, hi.
Thank you for sharing your journey with us. Can you give us any advice for would-be filmmakers or videographers how to move forward? But anything that you learned over the years that you wish you could have done differently?
That's a broad question, and one that I want to sincerely answer, because I think that one of the things I would have told myself is just always trust your instinct. I know everybody says it, but I think we all know what we want. We all can see ourselves in an ultimate, this would work for me kind of way. And structure your life to be in line with that vision. I was telling somebody when I came to Hawaii, my vision changed, right? I thought I wanted to be the studio exec. Just like when I was a kid, I thought I wanted my own channel, right? But when I came to Hawaii, my vision really was clear. I wanted to do what I love to do in the place that I felt the happiest. Whatever that meant for my ego that wanted to be in a studio exec, right? Whatever that meant. It meant me coming here and starting all over again and starting as a production assistant and doing that all over again. But however many years later, we're still here. My son is in school here, and this is like, I get to do this still. Like, how lucky is that? So I would say that the best advice is just don't give up on what you want to do. Find a way to do it. And be as prepared as possible. And the only way to be prepared is to talk story with your neighbor, see what's going on, come to these things and, see what kind of supports, what kind of talent people have, inclinations, support each other in that, right? I would say. More questions? Anybody? Yes.
I have a question. Do you have any insights on fundraising processes and are there people who are looking to fund good ideas, or are there people who want an almost finished package, or
that's like a super fun, not really, but it's an interesting question because I did the crowdfunding for our film, and I found that quite challenging. Right, especially in this economy today, it's a little bit challenging. So I say that, when you're getting started, rely on systems in place. So rely on places like, Pacific Islanders in Communication, Olelo, to help you, start there, because those things cost money. Equipment costs money. Being able to find distribution and marketing and all those stuff that PIC provides, those are all things that, so you may not be getting monetary support, but you're getting services. And to me, that's just as important, right? Like with my first film, we engaged people in the community. We said, hey, we're like a bunch of first-time filmmakers, and we really want to do this, and blah, blah, blah. Would you give us a discount on our lunches today? And sometimes they'll give it for free. People sometimes, people just, they see somebody with a dream and they want to help. They really do. So I would say that money comes from when you least expect it. So always be asking for it. Always be in the trail. Always see, and I don't mean money as like the actual money, but any transaction that could be helpful for your film, always be open for that. Yes?
So I just completed my first feature, and we're in the middle of doing our marketing and distribution for it. So I'm curious, how did you find your relationship with your sales agent? Where did you find them? And then are you having a good experience with your sales agent and your distributor?
Our sales agent, we met. When you're doing the film festival circuit, you meet a lot of other filmmakers, and you start asking them, same like I'm telling you to do now. Hey, how did you get distribution for your film? I saw this, that. Oh, I have this person and that person. So that's kind of how you do it, right? You bond. Our relationship with our, it's one of those things that you wish you were their priority, right? All the time, but they have a lot of films. And so you're in our, we are part of her deck. And she does, the film markets. So we rely on her in that relationship, and so far it's been a positive one. They've really, but they're also within a time limit, right? So I would say that the sooner you get through the hurdle of finding distribution, because your film ages as it happens, and after 2 years, it's a lot harder to get picked up. So when you do go into making a film and you don't know how you're going to distribute it, it's best to reserve your rights to screening it, because some people won't buy it if it's already been shown or if you already sold tickets for it. Again, one of all the many things that we need to talk about or think about as producers. Yes?
Have you applied for grants before, and do you have any advice on that?
Yes, I not much experience with that. I had my first experience, and I would say that it is definitely hard because you have to think of, you have to sell your film on paper, which is really hard. But I would say that at least it's a place to start. Because when you don't have that, then you're like, how do I get money to make a film? Who's going to be interested on that? So it becomes like a more complicated conversation. So I do think that grant is a great resource for first film or, short or independent filmmaking. Those are great. And there's a lot, again, there's like a lot of support for independent filmmaking, in the form of, just organizations that want to help first-time filmmakers and first-time producers. And, luckily, there is that set in place. Yes.
I'd like to follow up a little bit on that question that says, what are people interested in? So if you're selling your film, what kind of market research do you have to do? So, I mean, you can be very passionate about your story or how it's going to be portrayed,
Right.
but you're also trying to sell what's unique about it, what's captivating, what's compelling. So what do you do as you're developing that says, I have an idea,
Right.
but I don't know how far it's going to go?
Well, I think that comes even before, the producing comes along. It's a lot in the head of the writer. He's writing for an audience, hopefully. He's writing for an audience, and in his head, that audience is very clear. How that audience translate into actual audience, right? So he may be thinking about, well, this is made for children, ages this and that, because, or as simple as, I made this for my son. That's your audience, right? And so as a producer, you have to see the audience and say, okay, who subscribes to that audience, right? Like, what kind of people subscribe to that? And then start lining up your script or your story with the kind of projects that you see these people supporting, right? So if you were gonna go to PIC, right, you would come with like a different story that if you were going to go to Netflix, right? Like it would be maybe a little bit different in that sense because the audience that they have is different and you're going after the audience. So I would say that the way I do it is that I think of the audience and then think of the market. Some people think of the market and then align the film to that, which is another strategy. I think it's what, mass media tends to do. Yes.
On that question, as you brought up Netflix, how does one, when they do have a film, I might imagine this is the producer that would do this, approach some place like Netflix or Amazon about distribution or even funding a film if it's at the beginning of the creation of the film? Is that possible even here in Hawaii?
Yeah, I mean, there's places who have systems in place where you can submit, right? And we all heard those stories of like the one film that made it through all the readers in the studio system until it got funded, right? So that could happen. There's those avenues in place. I would say that, yes, it's best to have funding and distribution before you start the film. In our modest case, we didn't. We did our films in the hope of selling it later, right? That's how we did it, being our first film. My second film won't be like that. It would be like what you're describing. You try to sell the script first, get it funded, and then do it. And whether you have a personal relationship with somebody that knows somebody, there's always that 3 degree of separation that it really works really well. Like, you'd be surprised how well that rule works. But then, there's, like I said, traditional avenues of submitting, approach other people doing the same thing. There's no one clear-cut way. Some people like to do they will film part of that to send with the script in hopes to sell it. And, some people will approach, companies that do bundling, right? Like you give them a script and they say, okay, well, we could attach this and that, and then they'll pitch it for you. Different ways. I don't know. There's a lot. A lot and not one clear one. I would say, to answer your question, from Hawaii, I would say what I know you're already doing, which is reaching out to the systems in place kind of scenario, I think is what gets you the furthest. I think, we're going to see Becky in a little bit from HIF. That's a great platform, to start upon. Even if you had a script, like, Cheryl over at PIC, or, they know people. So reach out to your community and say, I have this script, I want to make it, how do I go about? In Hawaii, stay close to home and harness those relationships like that we already have. The state film office is also really great at listening to ideas and being helpful on, sending guidance or at least aligning you with people that could help. Yeah. Yes.
Just along the lines of that, could you speak to maybe how people protect their ideas? Because, when you're going through, of course, on our island, we're Ohana, so we will share openly. But in a marketplace where where an idea can be snatched, and how do you protect yourself when you're actually trying to solicit your idea out there for funding?
Yeah, there's different ways of going about. I would say, as soon as you have an outline of your idea, it's really good to just go to the WGA website, the Writers Guild of America. I think it costs $20 or something. And you can submit your idea and be protected in that way. I would say once you reach a stage in your creative script that you feel comfortable, file for a copyright, again, another $20. You can do it online, submit. Protect yourself. When you're going to share your script with possible collaborators, you can always do a non-disclosure agreement that says that you're giving them the right to read your script and give you opinion, but they can't, you know what I mean? So have that in place so that if they ever go, you say, hey, I have this piece of paper. So that's kind of, how you protect yourself, like we were saying, have it in writing, right? Have that, if that's important to you, to keep the domain of your idea. And if that's a concern, just file it. Copyright, Writers Guild, even sending a certified copy to your lawyer will, I believe, is a good idea.
So can you repeat that organization again?
WGA, Writers Guild of America.
Is there anything like that for documentaries? I'm sure it's a whole different
thing. I'm not very versed on documentaries, so I'm hesitant to answer your question. Not really sure, but maybe somebody here can answer. Can you answer it?
You can submit your treatment, and it will still be counted in the Writers Guild of America. Submit your treatment outline of everything on it, and we'll take it from there.
This is the other Connie. Or the Connie, and I'm the other Connie. People get us confused sometimes. More questions? Hey.
Oh, I have one more question, I guess, because there are a lot of filmmakers who try and put on every hat, right? You're the do-it-yourself, do-it-all filmmaker who has to put on the producer's hat, but then you've got the creative hat, and, So when you have the luxury and privilege of having a producer, how much does a producer kind of like dabble in the creative in that, I think to Ed's point, is like somebody goes like, hey, this is my film and my idea, but it's not necessarily commercial or sellable. Does a producer come in there and go like, maybe, what do you think about this? Or is that kind of a collaboration or not really? Does it happen?
It depends on the stage that the producer gets involved and what they get involved with. Certainly, like in the case that I was explaining, I got involved with all the creative was already done. And it was just me, you know, but I've been in projects where I'm part of the creative committee, and we think about, you know, distribution and things at the genesis of the project because we have a very specific market that we're trying to hit. I'm sorry. So the question was, how do you? How much does it take, right? So I would say that in an ideal world, it's supportive of each other, where creatives understand that we're doing this in a certain budget and they're respectful of that, and they're not gonna take 5 takes when they can do it in 3 and that kind of stuff, you know, respecting that. But also the producing side, the business side, needs to know that they have the vision, and sometimes, you know, yes, it may cost a little bit of money, but it's going to sell because this, that, and the other. So it's you know, it really depends on that first contract that we were talking about what's going to be driven. I've had projects that are money driven that we say, and that's about 90% of them, that we say, you know, we only have this amount of money and this amount of time, and so we're going to do it. And if we need to change creative to fit that, we have to, because we have no other place to get money. Now, if we're in a very awesome place, which has only happened a few times, that you're like, okay, we want to do this because we think this idea is great, and you know, we have this money, but we always have a pool to be able to go, then it's a little bit more, you know, creative stuff. So it really depends on the structure of your film. And again, you know, it will depend where your funds are coming from or your ability to produce this. You had a question.
Just curious, is there one aspect of the whole process that is the most difficult or the biggest hurdle that you have to get through, that you find with your projects?
It's like asking who your favorite children is.
Is it money? Is it organization? Are they all equally?
They're all equally important, I would say. I mean, you know, money is one of those resources that we keep close to our vest. So that tends to be a little bit, to take the most elbow grease and sweat equity, right? Like you're writing a grant, or you're selling your idea to people, or you're inviting people to come help, right? So that takes a lot of energy, but so does the creative process of what am I talking about? What am I doing? You know, so I would say that they're all different in their own ways, and that's why it's such a collaborative process, because we're all good at different things, right? And so the great thing about filmmaking, and my favorite thing about filmmaking, is how many people it involves. And although that could be daunting because there's a lot of personalities you have to manage, we're also better in the end. We're also learning from each other. Sometimes all I learn from something is what I don't want to do, but I'm still learning, right? So it's a very community process, but in the end, it's all about. And it was funny, I was having dinner last night with a producer that I'm working with, and we were talking about this, and we both laughed, and we said, you know, the one thing about producing that nobody will tell you is this: you make the best decision possible with the elements that you have at that exact moment. That's all you can really do, right? So if you're in a situation and there's a problem, because there's many problems all the time, that's our job. All you can say is like, okay, well, this is where I stand right now. And right now, this is the thing that's going to make us move forward. So let's do that. It could have been the wrong decision, but at the moment, you didn't know any better. That's what you did. And that's the one thing I would say about any position in filmmaking is the drive to keep moving it forward, to bring it to completion, and that should always be your goal, is to finish. Don't start something that you're not going to finish, and that's why I say having a plan on where you're going to deliver this to is important, because things happen and one gets discouraged. So having that accountability, it's important, I think. Does that answer your question?
It looks to me like what you said about managing different personalities is really something that can't be written down in terms of your skills. And you must have very good people skills.
It's
If I'm the director, I would really need a producer.
Yes, it's definitely a management position. It definitely is that. It's human relationships. And a lot of my job, honestly, is making people understand the scope of film business. So, like, if somebody's asking for something, it's my job to teach that somebody why the other person is asking for that. Why is it important? And that's what I love about teaching, is that it opened, like, so I started my career in production, and it wasn't until I went to a different department, which was accounting, that I was able to have a better, more rounded vision of filmmaking. And the more you stay on it and the different positions that you do, you start to understand and be empathetic of the process, that now when I go to a set, it's like magic, you guys, and I hope you get to see it one day. You really see a ballet of people working together, and you will see, you know, this person coming up with like a huge piece of equipment, and the person in front of them, they're peripherally looking at that, and they will move for them to pass. And you're aware that this is all like a working together kind of a thing. And to me, I'm a dancer, so I translate it to a ballet. It really becomes that. And so the more empathetic you are to other people's job, I think the better I can do my job, because I understand what their needs are. They're not just asking, you know, this equipment for asking. They're asking because they want to deliver the best film possible for us, and I have to listen to that. So that sort of creates a little bit of the barrier of where to draw the line, right? Yeah. Yes.
I have a question around budget.
Yes.
And I think, I don't have a specific question because I know that every project is very, very different. And I guess mostly I'm just curious if there's like any resources locally or other, like maybe other workshops or things that...
For like a budgeting class?
Yeah, budgeting class, or just kind of wait, like maybe people who might be interested.
You know, I'm sure, you know, that's a great other workshop that it could do, because budget within itself, I mean, that could take us 6 months, right? But we can definitely do broad strokes, you know, and a few hours. Even just how to read it, it's important. How it looks like what are the kind of things, how it sort of works. Yeah, that's an interesting workshop. It's definitely a skill set within itself, and I would say that it's very much in line with the lion heart of a line producer. You know, it really goes hand in hand with that. But it's a very important skill set to have, and in the end, it's literally the bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And then the budget is created in pre-production, right?
Yes.
So it's really challenging because we're searching for funding for pre-production for film, for a documentary film.
Yeah.
And so, but we haven't had the time or the resources to really create and also just knowing exactly what we're going to be doing.
Right.
We have been working on the narrative and the storyboard for, you know, the treatment for years. We're pretty solid there. But still, I don't know, how do people kind of navigate budget preparations for, you know, looking for pre-production funding when they're not even in pre-production, but they have to have a budget for post-production, like for pre, post, and production. So, anyways, just to add, I guess, to the need.
Yeah. Well, I think that's where grants become important, right? Because you can file for grants for pre-production. There's local support, like I think Ohina does a lot of pre-production support as well locally. So, you know, there is little bit out there. At the same time, in those stages, you're keeping it to 1 or 2 people, right? The creatives to be able to do that. And when you're at a point that you're ready to go with production, that's when you start racing. But you should definitely know how much you're raising. So you would need your budget to be as accurate as possible so that you don't, get into trouble down the line. So I would say if this is the first time doing a budget, it's always great to, there's the University of Hawaii, there's teachers there that could probably look over and say, oh my God, you're missing like basic stuff, like crafty, right? Like how are people gonna eat? Did you put something in your budget there for cleaning supplies? Because, it's trash bags, so you really, even me, when I do a budget, I'll send it to my friends and be like, what am I missing? Right? Because it's too much to think about. But, yeah. Yes?
Going back to multiple personalities that you have to deal with, is there anything that you do for yourself, because it's pretty much a leadership position, to help you, I guess, deal with lovely personalities?
I'm a mom. I'm a mom. I only have one child and he's 8, but I have like 100 production kids. I think that's just, I was always that, I genuinely like other humans and I am concerned for their welfare and well-being. And so that helps a lot because you're able to see them as a person, no matter. A lot of people come to me and they're like, oh, Connie, I'm so sorry. I'm really bad at paperwork and here's whatever. And I say, okay, how good are you at lighting for a camera? I'm really good. Okay, that's all I need, right? You have to understand that people are there for a specific job. And even if they have difficult personalities, right? They're there for a reason and we value them for that. Now, it becomes the point too where it could be disruptive to the process and then you have to take them to the side and be like, hey, you're being not so great. Let's figure this out. Personally, I like to wake up early in the morning, do the yoga and watch the sunrise because whatever happens after that, I already had a good day. I think I don't know if that answers your question, but okay. Do we have any more time? 4 minutes. Good. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much. Thank you.